but if anything, it helped to generate conversations about things we never talked about, if not from our audience, but with ourselves, as Sofia was mentioning, how we are empowering each other. But because we have this group of 6 or 7 people that are uplifting others, it just naturally comes off when we're on our own in our own lives and we talk to other people, and we can be that kind of person to uplift and even to encourage them to speak out on any topic that they feel passionate about that needs to be talked about, and to encourage difficult conversations.
Okay, let's go. Okay, welcome back to Hawaii Real, everybody. I'm your host, Iokeehu, and I want to send a shout out to Hawaiian Springs Water, our beverage host for this episode. You can find Hawaiian Springs Water on Amazon. I got the link down below, so in case of it, delivered right to your door, even if you're not in Hawaii. It's great stuff. And this episode is brought to you by the Native Hawaiian Chamber of Commerce. The Native Hawaiian Chamber of Commerce's mission is to malama Native Hawaiians in business and commerce through leadership, relationships, and connections to economic resources and opportunities. The Chamber's programs and events are designed to facilitate connections and promote business growth, professional and economic development, and sustainability. The Chamber's membership is open to individuals, nonprofit organizations, and businesses of all sizes. To learn more about the Chamber and how you can join, visit the website, www.nativehawaiianchamberofcommerce.org. All right, you guys, awesome.
Wow.
Okay, and I have 3 awesome ladies with me today from the Wahine Collective podcast. And can you guys go ahead and introduce yourselves? You guys came last week and you were sitting and just observing and watching and having a good time. And now we got you on the show.
Yeah, we are here. I'm Aries Jackson from thewahineco. And last week I had so much fun watching you guys interviewing your guests. And we are back.
Hi everyone, my name is Liza Corotan, and I'm so excited to be here. I was with Aries last week when we were watching your guest last week, and it was a great experience.
Hi everyone, my name is Sofia Loren, and this is actually my first time here at the Hawaii Real podcast, so I'm really excited.
All right, well, thank you so much for coming on. So where can people find you guys, first of all?
People can find us at the Wahine Co on Instagram. We also started a TikTok, also at the Wahine Co, and we also have a website. And all of those can be found on the link in our bio on Instagram.
And I'll put the links to all of that in the description below so you can check it out. And in that description, if you guys haven't subscribed yet, what are you waiting for? Get on YouTube and subscribe to this channel, Hawaii Real. If you're one of those awesome listeners on any of those audio platforms, Amazon Podcast, Google Podcast, Spotify, Apple Podcast, can you do us a favor? Can you also go to the YouTube channel at Hawaii Real and hit subscribe? It's going to help this channel so much and just make everything so much easier on my life. Jeez. So, ladies, who started the podcast for Wahine Collective? Collective. Sorry.
No, you're good. So Aries Jackson actually started the Wahine Collective podcast. If she doesn't mind, I would probably like to share a little bit about it. She had this vision during the beginning of the pandemic around May, June, and she reached out to ladies that she knew from work, from people she've met before the pandemic, and thought it was a great idea to bring all of these ladies together. So we met one day and we just noticed that there are so many things like going on in the world. We feel very distant from each other, and we're not coming together as a group of women in Hawaii where they can come together and to grow as women and to learn from one another. And when she reached out to me and Sofia, it was just like I felt like it was a really important moment, because myself, I felt like I needed people around me, especially during the time when we were social distancing and quarantining, and I felt like I just needed people to be surrounded with, even if it was through online or whatever it may be. And with her vision, and we talked about it, that's how we started the Wahine Collective.
So how many of you are there in the collective?
With our new season, so we started season 2, we have 6 ladies.
Awesome.
And one of them is Aries' daughter, and she lives currently in New York. So we have not only people here in Hawaii, but also people from Hawaii, now they've moved to the mainland. So that's awesome.
So what's the main focus of the collective?
Well, actually, Liza mentioned about we, want to amplify the voices of our team, but also of others. And our objective and our mission is to amplify the voices of women or wahine in Hawaii. And I want them to feel as important. And because they feel important, and perhaps they can inspire other women to feel important and that their voices are also heard. So especially during the pandemic, I thought maybe there were a lot of negative voices on social media. And at that time, I feel like we really need to hear our own voice here in Hawaii, especially the woman. How do we feel about things? And I think the world needs to know that the women in Hawaii have our own voices. We have our own experience that we want to share. And a lot of the experience I was listening to or reading on social media is from people outside of Hawaii. Mm-hmm. But and they would repost the things on social media that's not from Hawaii. So I thought, like, ordinary women like us, we can come together and let's amplify our voices, and we hope to inspire others to also express their voices. And I think culturally it's important that we have that, self-esteem to be able to speak up.
So what is the big challenges that you guys have seen through just creating the podcast? And is there a reason that you chose to do a podcast platform as opposed to anything else?
One of the main challenges that we faced just with the pandemic is connecting with each other during the podcast. It was a first time for us. Usually we meet in person to do our recording, but not having that face-to-face interaction was a little bit hard at first. Like in this scenario, we can see each other. We can see each other's facial expressions. But I feel like with us having to do some of our podcasts via Zoom, it was a little bit harder to connect at first. We experienced some technical difficulties, but we got better at it. And hopefully we get to, go back in person and try recording like right here. It's much better for us.
But being in person, we still have technical difficulties. Look at this.
True.
We're supposed to have 4 microphones, and we only have 2, so that happens.
We'll work with what we have. Yeah.
Yeah, because it's one of the things. It's like, that's kind of how I started the podcast. Just what did I have available, and then just start pushing into slowly collecting, the gear and slowly figuring things out one by one. What has been like your guys' experience with that? With you guys are doing it on Zoom mostly?
Yes.
Has there been like complications and stuff with that, and how you guys work through that? You have any one story or anything like that?
Yes. In the beginning, when we were figuring out how to record a podcast, we found that Zoom was effective because you could record all of our audios through Zoom, and then it'll be saved through their cloud. And when it comes to editing, all of the audio is there. But a challenge would be if we were to have a conversation. Say, like, I can talk right now and you could be speaking over me. But when it was on Zoom, it would only capture one person's audio. And we would have to speak all at once, finish our sentence or finish our thought, and then another person would speak. And there were times where we would have to say what we were saying again. And I feel like a complication with that would be you probably wouldn't speak because you're like, oh, I don't want to interrupt someone.
So just like in the background.
You'll be in the background. And that was a problem. But I think one of the best things about recording on Zoom is that we are able to have one of our ladies join us as well. Like, instead of having to do it in person, she from New York can also contribute to the podcast and still be with us. And that's how we got to know her along like last year, because I've never met her until just recently, actually, when she came here to Hawaii. But I feel like most of our connections happened on Zoom when we were recording our podcast.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, the convenience of having Zoom, because everybody has smartphones and they can just log in, or their laptops or whatever.
Yep.
So that totally made it convenient. I did a couple of Zoom podcasts over the lockdowns too. And yeah, same thing. Like the internet would cut out, or it would just start getting choppy and grainy or pixelated. was like, what did you say?
Right.
Dude, you got to repeat what you said. So
Yes.
yeah, I promised myself I'd stop doing online interviews because there's so many things that can go wrong. I mean, there's so many things that can go wrong in an in-person interview, and you just kind of magnify that sometimes with Zoom interviews. And then I don't know if you guys noticed this, but talking in person, like you get to really see the person, the wrinkles in their eyes, the facial expressions a lot better than you would on a Zoom. It just makes it more personable for me. That's why I just love in-person conversations.
Totally. And another thing is you can actually like read like the room. You can tell when your audience members like feeling very like excited and you're like, cool, I can feel it through in person. But when we're on Zoom, it's like, okay, I'm listening. And sometimes I'm not going to lie. I'm going to zone out. I'd be like, okay, I'm not talking and I'm just listening. And then because I am a college student, I'm on Zoom a lot. So I kind of like switch to this mode of I'm a student in a classroom listening to someone speak. So I'm just like listening and I'm tuning out and I'm tuning out. I'm like, wait, we are recording a podcast. I should be like listening. I should be attentive and stuff like that. So that's another complication. But I mean, we make do with what we have. And we've been recording our podcast for almost a year on Zoom. And it's really a cool experience to have a mic in front of you and like, you know, this is our first ever, this is our first time being a guest speaker, so this is interesting.
Yeah, I want to add, there was one occasion when we actually tried to do in person, and it was an owner of a restaurant. Sofia was there, and we went to her restaurant, and she brought the equipment, and it did not work very well because there were noises. So that's something that we learned. If you do want to do in person, you do have to have a setup like here. And at least you know the location, it's quiet. You don't want to go somewhere where there's background noises because we're not prepared to do that. And I think there were a lot of, because of that, maybe the way that you wanted to happen and the questions were, the way she answered the questions, you couldn't really hear what she said. So I think that was one of the things we learned in the very beginning. But we didn't really have that many, we didn't go to a podcast workshop or we were not like professional interviewers. But I think what we do have is just the passion to like find out and learn from the wahine that we interviewed. And we are grateful that we had great, in the beginning, I mean, Chef Michelle from MW Restaurant.
Oh, I love that restaurant.
I love that restaurant. Now she, opened up a new restaurant, and we should check it out. And the chef that we also interviewed at Nook, and unfortunately she closed her restaurant during the pandemic, but we were able to try some of her awesome food. So we had great mana wahine in our podcast, though we didn't really have that much experience, but we are blessed to just have, I guess, people who probably hear us. Why do you want to interview me? And I said, it's because we just want to hear your voices. We want you to, share something that maybe the public don't know about you, like the experience that a lot of people might not heard of. So that was very enticing to those guests. And so we are happy to have, some like Sofia here to be open to interviewing them, and Liza here to be in charge of the content in social media. And we have other team members that helped us to just kind of put everything together. And we're working on our new logo now because we came up with that logo very quickly, and we're working on other collateral materials. So we hope that what we learned in the first season will kind of give us something to work on for season 2.
Yeah, no, I think that's really great how you guys just did it, even without experience. That's one of the things I hearken to, and I tell people when they're starting out or when they're even thinking about having a podcast, it's like, you just got to do it. Or even thinking about having a business on the side, or just thinking about selling stuff on Facebook Marketplace. Just like, just do it. Like, stop analyzing it so much. Analyze it a little bit, figure out the problems and things that you have to get through to just do it and start. Like, you got to take that first step, and you're going to mess up, but you're going to figure out the problems as you go along, and you get better and better and better. I had one episode, I think it was my third episode, and I showed up and I forgot my laptop.
Oh my.
Are you kidding?
Yeah, I
me?
showed up to the location. I live like half an hour away from the location. I was like, yep, okay, well, what do you want to do? So we just recorded it off the camera and the camera audio.
Wow.
Yeah, so it was kind of terrible. But we did it, and it was a learning experience. I never forgot my laptop again. So, I mean, yeah, crap happens.
Totally.
What are the big things you guys like to cover in your podcast episodes? Or is there an end goal to reaching a specific audience?
One thing I love about the Wahine Collective is that we focus on intergenerational conversations. So you have somebody who's in college, you have some people who are in their mid-20s or at an older age, and we're just coming from different...
Very diplomatic.
No, auntie, no. But you know what I mean? Like, we're
Yeah.
coming from that intergenerational dynamic. So you will get to hear the different perspective from a woman of Hawaii. And I just think that's so important in this time frame, so that, some people parents don't know how to speak to their college students, or vice versa. I don't know how to speak to my mom, who's like in her 40s. And I think like being in this space of speaking with other women and being able to interview them allowed me to learn how to create that bridge of communicating to other people from different backgrounds, because not all of us are born and raised in Hawaii. Some of us actually just recently moved here, while others have been here for a while, and others have they have deep-rooted connections to Hawaii and the land that, like me, I wouldn't understand so much because I recently moved here. So I think that's one of the value that we have at Wahine Collective, is that we're able to create that bridge for intergenerational mentoring and communication, and also allow for a space for other people to share their experience as well. I got to interview Miss Michelle, and I was so amazed by this thing that she shared with me. Just a quick background. She told me that when she started cooking, she didn't even know how to cook broccoli. She didn't know how to cook broccoli. I was like, what? You're Michelle, Chef Michelle. And then she's like, yeah, I just had to do it and start with how to boil the water. She had to ask her teacher how to boil water. I was so shocked by her story, but I wouldn't have never gotten to know that if it wasn't through this platform of Wahineco. So I'm just really grateful to share this moment with amazing Wahinas.
Yeah, that's a really great perspective. I've seen a lot of podcasts, but I haven't seen one focused on intergenerational communication like that. That's super cool.
That was something that I wanted to build with the intergenerational communication. There is definitely the misunderstanding, between one generation to the next generation, and between one ethnicity with another, or if you've been here in Hawaii, or you were born here in Hawaii or just moved in Hawaii. So the perspective is always different. So that's why it's important to have sort of like different age bracket, and also experience, and even the length of time. Some of us were not born here. We had actually in season 1 someone that was part of our team, and she was from South Africa. So we loved her perspective because she's bold and she loved Hawaii, but also she kind of like bring that experience from South Africa. How does she see herself here in Hawaii being from South Africa? So I thought that was kind of neat.
And that's going to be a killer story. Like, what are the experiences that she's showed you guys or talked about? Or like the differences from South Africa to Hawaii? I know she's not here, but you got to answer for her.
I would like to
Sorry.
speak up on her behalf, but it's mentoring was one of the theme. And she's like, in South Africa, there's no such a thing as mentoring or mentorship, So, and in my country too, I'm originally from Indonesia. It's not very common that, I want to look for a mentor or I want to mentor someone. So from her perspective and her experience. She wants to know more. How is it here? How to look for a mentor, how to be a mentor in Hawaii versus where she was from. So I thought that was kind of very interesting from her perspective. And one time we also talk about like finance podcasts, you know, and she mentioned, we talk about like the cost of wedding. So like in her country, when she got married, they have to, right, as her husband have to give a dowry to her. And
like goats and stuff.
Money, goats, and things. Who knows? We have to find out like how much is it? Like that's the thing. Like for them, they have to still give a dowry, and so we were, because some of the younger team members were like, "How much money should we save for our wedding?" And she's like, "Well, in South Africa, you have to save a lot of money if you're a man because you have to give a dowry." So that was something we learned.
To the woman's family.
To the woman's family.
I have another Leseho story.
Go.
Her name is Leseho. But I just remember her talking about how she was really shocked at people in the US having iPhones, you know, when they couldn't necessarily afford it. Because in South Africa, if you don't have the means, you just would never get it. Whereas like here, you know, you can get credit cards and buy an iPhone. Whereas, and you know, it's kind of like low-key a debt. But in South Africa, it's just uncommon for people to use their credit card and max it out for something that they really can't afford. So I thought that was an interesting perspective.
Yeah, no, Americans, we're spoiled. So, I mean, I'll say it. I've been to Indonesia. I've been to Japan. I've been to the Philippines. I lived in Manila for 3 years. Yeah, no, it's just Americans. We have it really, really good. You know, so it disturbs me sometimes when people complain a lot about a lot of the good things we have. You know, it's like, hey, it's okay to complain. There's always room for improvement. But man, go to some other country and see how they live and see what they have to deal with on a day-to-day. You know, just living in Manila and seeing the shanty towns, like cardboard boxes, and, you know, hurricane comes, or what do they call them? Not hurricane. Typhoons, yeah. And just wipes out like villages and stuff. Man, toilets in a bucket. Remember that? Everybody carried around the little handle with the bucket on it.
The tabo.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what it is.
I remember there was a book, Signs of the Philippines. And one of the things that sticks out was one of the signs. It was in a public restroom, and it said, conserve toilet paper, use both sides. It's like, just a sign like that should tell you like the situation that another country has, or the people have, right? They're trying to conserve something that we just take for granted. Like fresh water. What do we do with fresh water? We crap in it and flush it. Like other countries don't even have access to that.
Right. We take it for granted. So I'm curious, you've been also in podcasts for a while, and probably about almost a year now?
September 2019, so a year and a half-ish, almost 2 years. Yeah, right. Next month is September. Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, 70-something episodes.
I mean, did you ever think about like bringing another team members? Because we have like 5 or 6, and it's...
So that like shocked me when I met you guys. You guys had 6 ladies that are all on the same team and passionate about doing this. It's like, wow, I haven't found like one person that's passionate as I am to jump in. And so I think for the first year I did it on my own, and then I teamed up with 2 other gentlemen, John Garcia and Konoho Koko. They were helping me out just with sprucing it up a little bit, and a lot about changing it more into a business aspect of it, because I was just doing it as a passion project for a long time, and they really helped me see the value in it and how we can actually start making money from it. So that's kind of where it's transitioned to.
That's exciting. Where are you going with what's your vision with Hawaii Real Podcast? Like, I mean, now that you know us and there's a possibility that we can collaborate, is that what you're looking for?
Yes, absolutely. So once I get this whole audio interface thing set out, we get more than 2 microphones. The plan is for me to help produce other podcasts and have other hosts under the Hawaii Real umbrella, just because I have all the equipment, these fancy cameras, these fancy lights, fancy microphones, and more importantly, the location. Like you said earlier, the podcast, like this is a great, quiet, semi-private location that, a lot of people don't have. You could run a podcast out of your house to a certain extent but you have to have like a nice big house, and you have to have quiet. It's got to be quiet. You can't have dogs barking outside, cars driving by. That happened a few times. We had dogs barking in the background. Had to do a lot of post-production audio scrubbing on those. But having a good location is definitely key. And so my thought is, hey, instead of just doing one podcast a week, where this equipment is just sitting doing nothing for the rest of that time, why not have more? And there's so many people that I've met along the way that were great guests on, and they spoke really, really well. And I was like, dude, you should do a show. Girl, you should do a show. It's like, yeah, I've been thinking about doing a podcast, but there's so much into it. It's like, okay, well, let's talk, kind of deal. So I was really, really stoked when you guys hit me up and you're like, hey, can we get some advice on a podcast? I'm like, yeah, just come down and watch. How about that? So that's kind of the future, is to create not just Hawaii Real podcasts, but create Hawaii Real studios, and to produce other people's podcasts who don't have, the expertise or the knowledge or the experience or the financial backing to buy all the equipment. There's no reason for all of that. You just come here. I have all the stuff. We just set it up and go ahead and produce. And one of the other aspects of the plan is to push more business podcasting and actually offer this platform to businesses who want to do like a podcast for their own company or their own employees or what have you, or for their products to push out to customers. Because I think that podcasting is the next platform for advertising. I think it's you had radio, you had television, and you had the internet, and now you have another platform, podcasting. Because like with podcasting, you have a long format where you can talk really deep about anything, and then you can just take that, put it online, and it's online forever. And then you can chop it up into little bits and pieces and put it all over social media. So I think that is going to be the new advertising branding for businesses coming out. And I think the sooner businesses catch on to it and start producing their own stuff, the more successful they're going to be.
Wow. A year from now, you may have lots of those people joining in and
Cross
using
fingers.
your equipment. And definitely like the community in Hawaii, what we talked about last week is, to also bring people and watch us talk and guests maybe in the future and network. Businesses can do that. I could see that, like whoever they want to invite, they could bring some guests. That's something WahineCo love to do too one day, to bring in some guests and do like a real community, just encourage each other and be able to amplify their voice in person, but not necessarily during the podcast, maybe after the podcast or post-podcast or pre-podcast. So I think that's part of being in Hawaii. You have to kind of like have that sort of community from what we talked during the podcast or before. What kind of community are we bringing in, right? Or network.
Cool.
Okay, so there's the three of you. Who are the other members of your team?
The other members of our team are Lena Lariosa. We have Tatiana Meyer, which we talked about her before. We have Connie Kwan, and that's it. We also want to give a honorable mention to Chloe Machida. She was a part of season 1, but now she's just helping out with us in whatever we need. Mm-hmm.
How did you guys organize giving each other positions and jobs and stuff like that? Was it one person saying, hey, I need someone this, or is it like a collaborative effort where like, hey, I could do this or I could do that?
Yeah, that was actually when I asked the team. I was just knowing them previously from their experience being a part of the organization that I'm working with right now. I kind of knew their strength, what would their passions. And then I, asked them, would you like to do the content? Would you like to be the interviewer, Sofia? And she is, in communication. Liza and Sofia is very comfortable doing some, interviews, perhaps with your experience. So, and then there's some, like Chloe knows how to do photography. That's her business. And Tatiana, being that she's not living in Hawaii, I thought that was kind of interesting, her perspective, and same with Lasejo. So I wanted to and Lena is like she's also in communication, but also from her artistic point of view, I wanted to get her, just kind of eye on things. So, and she's very organized. So I needed that, someone to organize things and help us lead in the first season. So just focus on their strengths. I think that really helped.
That's really cool because like organization is key, and that's my weakness. If anybody knows me, I'm like scatterbrained and whatnot. So, but that's like I'm an idea person, so I just like creating ideas and come up with ideas and just throw them on the wall and see if they stick, kind of thing, and just organizing things. Well, I guess I want to do this today. I just want to do that tomorrow.
Totally. Aries is very vision driven, very determined, and I feel like a lot of us kind of piggyback on her visions and dreams for the Wahine Collective, and we help to make it realistic, but still kind of having it out of reach type of dream. Like we feel like we can accomplish this, but what if we take it a step up? And she helps us a lot with being able to dream her dreams, but also to own it and to make that passion project, that vision, ours, so we can own it as well. And that comes with great leadership. And with her visions, it just helps us to also bring her back down to earth and be like, okay, that's very, very high dream, but we'll get there eventually.
So Aries is the one who's shooting high, aiming high.
She is, yes.
Good. Yeah, that's one of the things that I've always tried to bring on with my guests and talk about is the mindset to accomplish things that you didn't think you could do. So many people in our society these days, I'm sure it's been forever, for as long as humanity's been around, or they think they can't do something, or they're not worthy enough to do whatever project or whatever passion it is or something like that. And it's within our abilities to do that. It's the biggest block for ourselves is our own brain saying that I can't do that,
Right.
or no, I can't be an astronaut. Whereas when we're kids, like the world is our oyster, right? You can do whatever you want, like imagination and stuff. And then somewhere along the way, society's telling you can't do something, parents telling you can't do something, siblings telling you can't do something, friends telling you can't do something. Have you guys experienced that? I know some of you are really young, and then Aries is more experienced, but is that why she has the leadership and is bringing you guys along?
Yes, definitely. And I agree. I feel like there's a lot of fear of speaking out and just expressing what your thoughts are, because you never know, social media, you can reach so many people, and you can get so much like criticism or hate. It's so easy to get that kind of feedback online. But in WahineCo, our main goal is to empower women to speak up. And because we're around empowering women and we just uplift each other, it allows us to feel confident to speak up and say, hey, this is my experience and we own it. Because we know that other people are probably experiencing something similar too. So when I look back at it, would I have done this on my own? Probably not. I'd be, to be honest, a little bit scared and worried what other people would think. But just to be around empowering women, I feel like we're feeding off each other's energy so much that, I've just been thinking about the person I was a year ago before I started WahineCo, and I'm sure they can both relate to this. I feel like I've grown so much with just being surrounded by them and having that platform to express myself. And so to the people that listen to us, I hope that they also feel the same way, that they can be empowered to go out there and do what that passion project they've been dreaming about and be surrounded by other uplifting people.
You mentioned like social media and the fear of putting stuff out there for criticisms and stuff like that. Have you guys experienced any, haters and stuff like that come across on social media?
I personally haven't experienced anything on our social media accounts where someone is kind of like bashing on us or not agreeing with what we say on the podcast or anything we post. But if anything, it helped to generate conversations about things we never talked about, if not from our audience, but with ourselves, as Sofia was mentioning, how we are empowering each other. But because we have this group of 6 or 7 people that are uplifting others, it just naturally comes off when we're on our own in our own lives and we talk to other people, and we can be that kind of person to uplift and even to encourage them to speak out on any topic that they feel passionate about that needs to be talked about, and to encourage difficult conversations that you won't normally hear on an everyday base.
I love that. Encourage difficult conversation. I think that's one of the main goals of podcasting throughout the world, is that they're bringing these difficult conversations to light. Sometimes it's funny, sometimes they're whatever, entertaining kind of podcast and goofy, but some of the real ones, they're just like, they're really getting into the teeth of what needs to be talked about and what isn't being talked about.
Yeah, I think that's what I always want to empower a team. When we have a theme that we want to talk about, let's bring it up to a level where, are we really being vulnerable here? Are we like showing examples that being vulnerable is important in our podcast? So you have to share not just the lighthearted things, but you have to share even the hurtful things and the things that you probably don't want to share before. So we want to like really challenge the team to feel vulnerable and share that information. So that actually, maybe when Sofia was saying like she's now a different person within that 1 year, it's because maybe she was vulnerable and now she's noticing the changes. Like, to change, you have to be vulnerable first. So not only I think we're inspiring other people to speak up, but also to be vulnerable, because that's where changes can happen after that process.
Yeah, you really hit that pain point that makes you vulnerable and makes you, make the change in your life. Before you hit that, you're just comfortable or whatever. Change doesn't happen when you're comfortable. Right? Change happens when you're uncomfortable and you're put in the spotlight, or you're put in a really bad situation where if you don't change what you're doing, you're just going to go downhill. Have you guys seen any changes? Have you guys uplifted anybody in your experience in the past year?
Just from, the team that are here, we got really close. We built a sense of trust. Whatever you share too is you're part of our community. What can we do to help each other? So if I may share with Liza, I know she just finished her degree in communication. She got her BA, but right before she entered into deciding whether she wants to move on and get her master's or get a job, I think we were there for her, and we see that vulnerability of her having that anxiety and not knowing what is best for her in her next step. Does she have the finances to go into? I think that was very, very vulnerable when we talk about finances. Like, we all feel poor right now. So then probably that kind of evokes something in her about like, do I really have the money now to pay for college, to pay for my master's? And that was very important for me as part of the team leader, that like, well, we have to put Wahineco in action, which means that we have to encourage another team member, which is our Wahine. How can we do that? By listening to her, and where is the part where we can help her, but just kind of listen and let her express herself of her anxieties, and that's okay.
Yeah, and just to add on to that, it totally shifted to like what I was thinking before I even thought about applying for the master's program at UH. I was totally thinking about, how am I going to pay for school? I mean, I can't pay for my undergrad now, and so many questions like, am I going to continue going on to school? Should I move? Should I just work and then pay off all of my loans and all of that stuff? It was just a lot of things were going on my mind. And with the topics that we talked about in season 1, we had finances, we talked about breakups, we talked about our faith journey. And these are topics that are very, in a way, it can be surface level. It's something that's normal, like faith and people going through relationships, or people who are struggling with their finances or even doing well in their finances. it really sparks something in me where we can be vulnerable, but also it comes through a place where I may be struggling with one thing, but I can also find that connection with another person. And I feel like that is such a strong bond that you can have between women. And it just shows that we're not alone in the situation that we're in. And maybe I am in this current state alone, someone who has overcome that sort of situation, or someone that's even heading into a position of where I was currently at. It totally just, it just shows that you're not alone. And I don't know, I'm very thankful.
Yeah. So what was the decision?
Well, the decision
wants to know.
Oh, okay. Everyone wants to know. Sure. So after I graduated with my bachelor's in communication, I got accepted to be a master's student at the University of Hawaii at Manoa. And the great thing is I'm a graduate assistant for the communications department. So that entails a job.
Nice.
Tuition paid for, and just
all the experience that's going to come with that. Yeah.
Totally. And yeah, if I hadn't
burden off your shoulders.
Right. If I hadn't reached out, I could have been stuck in that mental block. Like, I don't know what to do, and felt I was alone. So yeah. Yeah.
Those situations with going on to college, going on to, further education, it's like, you never know if that's the right decision or wrong decision. Totally. Like, you'll never know. Mm-hmm. If you go to school, you may miss opportunities. If you don't go to school, you may miss opportunities. So it's kind of okay no matter what you do, as long as you're happy with it, at the end. And school, you can always go back to school.
Yes.
And in this day and age, there's so many opportunities out there without formal education. Yeah. Like, people are becoming millionaires by podcasting. Go figure. Right? I don't get that. I'm still waiting for my millions. But yeah. But no, getting that education, I think it's always going to be valuable. It's always going to be key, especially in communications, because that's where the future is going. It's where the future. That's where humanity's always been. Communications, right? The civilizations that can communicate efficiently succeed, and when that communication breaks down, that's when things fall apart.
One more thing I want to talk about as far as change. I think the breakup episode, that was really good. I think we posted that during Valentine's, and I'm just noticing, like, being there with my daughter, and being in the same podcast and listening to her, and she probably heard of my breakups, and hopefully she learned something of my past relationship. But there was some vulnerable conversation because, like, she, her dad and I are not together anymore. So there was some interesting information that we kind of revealed during the podcast about breakups, and I think that improve our relationship. That, okay, as mother and daughter, you can have that conversation, but really, having that understanding instead of like judgment. So that's another thing we want to focus with Wahineco, is that you should be able to express how you feel and find that bridge, between the intergenerational, but also not judging each other, right? We're trying to do that, at least. Like, I want to hear your experience, Mom. Like, how was it when you broke up, right? When you had that failed marriage. But also, I want to hear, like, your experience, Tatiana, like, even though, are you scared to have, like, a commitment or a committed relationship because you've seen your parents, right? Like, not together. So I think that was kind of interesting, coming from, in the same podcast, daughter and mother. And maybe, things have gotten better between us. Actually, it has, because we're talking about it. So that's why I encourage to talk about it, right? Instead of not talking about it, express the pain maybe to someone else in your family. I encourage that in Wahineco.
Yeah, that's one of the great things with this cross-generational thing, is that not only it seems like you're coming from a place where you can express generational wisdom, but you can also express the failures of older generations and where we went wrong. And, hey, I did this. This is what happened. Don't do that. Yeah. Or if you're going to do that, do it this way or that way. So, I can totally recognize the failures of older generations and stuff like that too. So, my advice to younger generations is not always the best. So I don't know. So you guys were having photo shoots?
Yes,
with your podcast group?
yes. So at Wahineco, we like high quality pictures, high quality things. I'm just kidding, but yes, we did have a recent photo shoot. We actually did one of those glamping picnic or glam picnic. The recent hype on having like a really nice picnic out by the beach, and then we had one of our friends. She's starting her own business to set it up for us, and we had a really nice photo shoot for our upcoming content for season 2. So
Very cool.
Yeah.
What do you guys have to eat?
Oh, have you heard of a charcuterie board?
A charcuterie board?
Charcuterie, where it has like different types of like crackers, meats, cheese.
I like cheese and crackers
and
and
like
meats.
on like a
Okay.
wood platter.
Yeah.
Oh, we'll show you a picture afterwards.
Okay, so that's what.
So we had that, and it was really fun, to be honest, because we've never had that kind of experience before, and we're also supporting a friend of ours, her business that is starting up soon. And with the photo shoot, we're coming into season 2. Actually, today, as we are recording this podcast, we just finished recording our first episode of season 2. And what season 2 entails is deeper conversations. If you listen to the podcast episodes in season 1, we're getting deeper. We're talking about more difficult conversations. Sometimes it's going to be hard for us to try to not get mad, and staying neutral, and also being respectful of another person's opinion or their side of a topic. And that's kind of like the vision that I have for this coming season. And how this works is, last season, our one of our ladies, Lena, kind of took the lead on season 1, and she kind of paved the way of what the Wahine Collective is. And now that we have a metaphor where I'm driving this car. So I'm now driving the car into a new direction, and the new direction that I've chosen is to really hone in on the vulnerability. I feel like we can go a step further, and it's not only to empower other women, but it also is to encourage these conversations, because hey, there's some things that I can't talk about at home with my family or with my friends, but I'm going to be stepping out in my comfort zone and talking about this certain topic to you guys. And who knows, maybe someone else wants to or has this topic in mind. But also another thing is the conversations that I would love to have happen is just conversations where any woman can talk about, because from what I've seen, a lot of women collectives or women podcasts is all about empowering people who are already empowered. And I feel like some people who are just like, I'm just working this job or doing this thing, and maybe I'm not surrounded by people who are uplifting me, like seeing this as a platform, or just to start to embrace those conversations and to empower those that probably need a little bit of more oomph into it. But that's kind of like my direction and the vision that I have with the Wahine Collective season 2. Still in line with our mission and vision, but just taking a little step further into it.
Evolving ever so slightly.
Yes.
Loving it.
I'm excited to even go deeper for season 2. I think you mentioned a lot about conversation. So, we want to make it like it is a living room. It is like just us sipping wines and just talking story, right? And
Start sipping too much wine, that
maybe
conversation
too much
gets real.
information. Right. So, but we want to end it to like, okay, we do have our differences. We do have this deep things we want to talk about, but how do we, like Liza said, with that experience and that sharing, how is someone who's maybe not completely empowered yet, like feeling they can do it, but now they're like, okay, it's not as bad, it's not as bad at all. So how can we end that conversation with sort of that, kind of process for that person to feel a little bit more better in a way, or knowing the truth even more, right? But the truth sometimes is scary. But you know what? Behind that, maybe there's good things, right? So like we just recorded this first episode, like Liza said, and there's a lot of truth to it from one perspective, but we also want to hear the truth from the other side's of perspective. And that's, I hope that season 2 also talk about some of the different truths from different people, but then how do we again encourage that so it will not be like, oh gosh, this is just like people different opinions and they're going to fight and they're not going to like each other. Well, you know what? We have different truths, but where can we find ways that we want to not be that power struggle or I guess offense versus defense kind of thing, right?
Yeah, I think it's so important to have these conversations, like you said, the hard conversations, the conversations that people don't want to have. They just hold on to their own opinions and not share it, or feel like they're marginalized and they can't share it, and provide a place where they can. If you're not having those discussions and those conversations, something's broken in society. So, I applaud you guys for having that and bringing that to light. It needs to happen. And doing it via social media or texting or anything, that's not the way to do it. You got to be face to face, or, you guys are doing it on Zoom, because when you're face to face talking to somebody and you bring up some shit, you got to back it up. You can't just say it face to face like that. So many trolls on Facebook and Twitter and stuff like that. It's like, oh, say that to my face, bud.
Yeah.
But it's have responsibility for the words that come out of your mouth, the words that go into your platform or anything like that. So really, really applaud you guys for bringing those conversations out. It's good stuff.
Thank you.
Any last words for the Wahine Collective?
I'd love to say the last word. I just kidding. Well, I just want to say thank you. I think this is really what being a part of Hawaii and maybe Hawaii Real Podcast is just not necessarily. I want to break that barriers. Like maybe it's not really who not necessarily, but it's what can you, what kind of kindness or what kind of things can you give each other? What can we do to Hawaii Real Podcast? What can Hawaii Real Podcast do for Wahineco? And that build friendship. So being that I'm not from Hawaii, but I moved here, so I just wanted to say that if you are new to Hawaii, Wahineco will be a great place to kind of get to know the different varieties or perspective of things. And that's how I get to know you, right? Kind of just I want to learn. That's my perspective, right? Because I don't know podcasts. And so if we can just build that community in Hawaii, not because who or how long you've been here or what do you want to say, it's more what can we do for each other? It's like a relationship, right? But you just have to have that courage. And so if we can encourage others to have that courage to build relationship, it doesn't matter where you're from, how long you've been here, but it's what kind of goodness can you give to each other, right? How do we help each other? I think Hawaii can grow together.
Thank you so much for coming on, ladies. It's been so great. How do you guys close out your episodes?
Well, that's for today's episode. Thank you guys so much for listening to the Hawaii Real Podcast with guests. With our guests, we have Aries, Liza, and Sofia from the Wahine Collective. Thank you so much for listening. Giving it back to you.
And as always, stay happy, Hawaii.
Stay
real. Shaka's all over.
We're like shakas.
All right, that's awesome.